it was extremely graphic and disturbing to hear this about your own father's body, and in a courtroom filled with strangers other than my brother, and then my mom, who they put on an opposite side of the courtroom. It was like an out-of-body experience. I hope in the future, like for people that work those sort of jobs, they would think that through for the family members, you know?
Welcome back to the Broken Home Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we have fellow YouTuber Jen Magana. How you doing tonight, Jen?
I'm doing great, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. I've been looking forward to this, and here we are.
Here we are. Where are you originally from?
I am from Salinas, California. Not a very well-known town for those that aren't familiar with it, but just to sort of give you a little, background on it, it is a pretty much farming community. Pretty sure if you guys have bought lettuce or bagged salads and things like that, it's known for being called the salad bowl of the United States. So.
All right. You have your own YouTube channel. What's the name of that channel, and how long have you been running it?
Convicted Hearts, Jen Magana. I would say I have had it a little over 2 years. I haven't always been uploading to it, that long, but I've had it about 2 years.
And what was the motivation behind starting your channel?
I had an incident, more than an incident, I guess you would say, that occurred in my personal life, and it put me in a position where I was grieving the loss of my father, and also grieving the fact that I had lost my brother to incarceration due to what had taken place. And I really isolated myself, and I was dealing with severe mental health issues because of it. I really didn't leave my home for probably, 2 to 3 years. I just really went sort of inside of myself in a bad way. And I started watching YouTube. And I did find a pretty large community, like within the prison community. And one of the channels I came across was Heart Intentions. And the gentleman on that channel, Mitch Smiley, and his wife, Adrian Smiley, were extremely encouraging and thoughtful and kind. And I just found a lot of comfort, believe it or not, in the prison community. So that's kind of where it started.
Basically, anybody I reach out to in this community, ask them if they want to come on, tell their story, why they got involved in this. They're always more than happy to come on.
Definitely. I agree with that. Yeah.
Your father and your brother, how long ago did this take place? And can you tell us what happened?
Let me just sort of go back to even a little bit further, just to sort of give everyone a glimpse into what the full background is. Early 2000s, before my father was even killed, my stepfather was shot by my brother. During that time, my stepfather was a detective with our local sheriff's department. So as you can imagine, this was a big deal in a small community. Very well-respected detective is shot by his stepson. It was extremely traumatizing. Not only that, our father, our bio dad, was at that time a corrections officer at our local prison. So there was a lot of different nuances that sort of intertwined and made this, like, most people I've talked to that know my family story, or they're like, that sounds like a Lifetime movie. That's insane. But unfortunately, this was our life. My stepfather, thank God, he survived, despite having a wound to the head and the torso. He survived. He was in a coma for a couple months. He recovered, and believe it or not, long story short, he forgave my brother, and he actually wrote a letter on his behalf during his sentencing phase. So my brother did do a term in prison in the early 2000s. He got out, and when he got out, clearly he couldn't come home to where mom and stepdad are at that point, So our bio dad was sort of ending his career, not ending, but about to retire anyways. So he retired like a year or two sooner than he would have probably chose to with Department of Corrections. So my brother could go ahead and parole there at home with him. My mom, my bio dad, and myself picked my brother up when he was released. We did the whole thing, went out to eat on the way home. We're so happy telling stories, things we're going to do, sharing like things are going to be different. We're going to do all the stuff like we never sort of did before. We're going to make a point to get together. Like, I don't know, I guess just sort of the hopes and dreams we had over the last, 9 years. My brother came home to our bio dad's home, and that's where he lived for, I think he was just off of his parole. He had like a 3-year parole maybe. I could be a little foggy on the exact time, but about when his parole was up or when it was up, something happened. He had been going through a lot. My brother had been going through some things. He got into a physical altercation with my partner at the time, and I sort of pulled back because I saw the aggression, and it wasn't uncommon. My brother was an aggressive guy. This was common in our family, going back to childhood. But because I had little ones, I sort of pulled back. I wasn't going over to my dad's as often. I wasn't familiar with what was going on there. I never could have imagined what had happened. I was told by a family member, my dad and my brother were going on a fishing trip, and they would be gone a couple weeks. My dad had just purchased a travel trailer. He was really happy to have it. That was actually one of his sort of big hopes in retiring. He would get this travel trailer and travel all over the US. They were gone a couple weeks, and I started to try to call my dad, and he wasn't answering his cell phone. Kept trying, and it wasn't unlike him to not answer maybe a call or two. But once I kept calling and realized, okay, his birthday's coming up. I know he's back because I was told my brother had been driving his truck and someone saw him. In the pit of my stomach, I felt like something was wrong. I really did. I don't know what at the time what that meant, but I knew something was up. So I showed up at my dad's house. Nobody answered the first time. My dad's truck was in the driveway. I did hear noise in the house. I think I showed up a second time even. My brother answered the door. He didn't look well. The house, it looked different. It looked empty to me. Like there were things missing, things were moved around. He just let me know, hey, Dad's on a walk. Who might have questioned that? Okay, Dad's on a walk. But I still felt like something was wrong. And I thought to myself, I'm going to go back tomorrow. And if he tells me Dad's on a walk, I'm going to wait around in town somewhere. And I'm going to go a second time in the same day. And that's what I did. That second time I went in the same day, like 4 hours later, he said Dad was still on a walk. And that's when I asked, if I could use the restroom, walked through the house. And when I did, I passed by the door to what would be my father's office at the time. And I noticed like there was, to me, it looked like signs of a struggle. Like my dad's recliner was turned over. There was a broken lamp. And in that moment, I knew something bad had happened. I turned around to leave. I did feel a little fearful, like I don't know what took place, but I went to leave. I have a relationship with God. Something in me told me, tell your brother you love him. And people might think that's so stupid. Like, you thought he harmed your dad or he could have harmed your dad. Well, this is my experience. I felt like I needed to tell him that for whatever reason. I don't know. I told my brother I loved him, and he looked at me and he was like, you do? I said, yeah, of course. I love you. I left, and I knew that I was going to have to make a choice to call for a welfare check. And that's what I did. It was a Saturday, I believe. No, it was a Sunday, because I thought, okay, I called like maybe around 5 or 6 p.m. I didn't get a call back right away. And I thought they probably found my dad. You know what I mean? Maybe they got into a scuffle and my dad had a black eye or something and he didn't want to be seen. I don't know. I was trying to think of all kinds of things. But about 11:55 p.m. that night, my phone rang with the county number. Anyone that's from this area knows the county number. If you're getting a call that late on a weekend, it's either the jail, the coroner, sheriff's department. And it was actually a sergeant, and he identified himself, and he said, just straight out, no fluff, no, like, he just said, I'm, calling to let you know we found your dad's body wrapped up in the travel trailer, and we are charging your brother with his murder.
Wow.
Is this your only brother?
My only blood sibling, yes. 14 months younger to the day. So a lot of people thought we were twins. We were very, very tight growing up.
Okay.
Even just saying it out loud, like something that's so strange over time, maybe it's a coping mechanism for me, like saying it, it doesn't quite feel like I'm talking about my own life.
Yeah.
And I think that I even talked to a therapist and she's like, that's part of your way of coping and dealing.
Did you ever find out like how the altercation happened between your brother and father?
That is one of the things that really tormented me for so long. I mean, it still does in some ways. I just try not to allow it to consume me. I wanted to know every detail. Like, I don't know if that's like a female thing, but I felt like I had to know exactly what, where, how. And really the first 2 weeks, I didn't even know the cause of death. They let me know later on my father had been deceased for at least 10 days to 2 weeks.
Wow.
So that compromises, an autopsy. And it turned out that after doing an X-ray or CT scan, they found that my father's neck was broken, and that was the cause of death. I wanted to know really bad what happened. My brother never gave a statement, never, not even one sentence, which didn't surprise me. I mean, he was somewhat familiar with law enforcement, and being a convicted felon, I mean, obviously he knew everything he said could be held against him. The detective that was working the case had told me, like, once this is over, I will tell you everything. Like, I will let you know everything. I promise. So I felt somewhat confident I would know something, but by the time everything was wrapped up, I knew nothing. They never had a scenario. They couldn't find even really the place the crime took place. They went through the house 2 or 3 times, luminol, the whole thing. They followed the traces of wherever they went camping. So they did actually go camping somewhere. They never actually found a crime scene. So I really don't have an answer.
And was your brother, like, growing up, you guys were tight? Was he like a happy kid? Like, what was his personality like?
He was very aggressive. My brother, I've seen him beat the brakes off of several people. My dad was an aggressive guy. I grew up in an aggressive household. It was not uncommon to have altercations and maybe get a phone call from my brother, go pick him up from somewhere or something took place. He had gotten into it, and we grew up in a very violent household. I feared my dad. My brother and I, we would hear the sound of his vehicle, and we knew it when he would be coming home from work, and he worked at the prisons. He worked this certain shift where he would have to come home and sleep. And we knew if we made a peep, we were going to get it. And I don't mean just a spanking. So we made like a hiding spot behind our house, and we like dug this area underground, put some brush over the top. And when we would hear our dad's vehicle, he had like a VW Bug. So how you kind of recognize that sound. We would run behind the house and we would hide, and we would wait until we thought our dad was asleep. And then, we'd come inside the house. Just to give you an idea,
How old were you when your parents split up then?
I was 12, so my brother would have been 11. it was a sense of relief for me anyways, in a way, because like I said, I feared my dad so deeply. And I say this I want to make it clear, I truly forgave my dad, and I love him, and I have love for him. So I don't hold any grudges, or I'm only saying this so people know, my life story, and know like what you can forgive and move on. And if you don't, that's up to you as well. I don't judge anyone. A lot of people probably wonder, why would you forgive that? If you waste food or leave a light on, now that's grounds for a beating. There was twice I was so humiliated. Like, he made me get food out of the garbage that my friend threw away and eat it in front of her, because we don't waste in this house. And I remember my friend was like mortified, she had no idea. And she obviously never wanted to come over again. I mean, my brother he wasn't a hyper kid. He got into trouble, stuff like that. But it was like fighting, things like that. But that's sort of the group we ran with. Like, a lot of kids were fighting and getting into trouble.
The talk that your dad had with you later on, do you know if he had that same talk with your brother? If they had that kind of reconciliation?
I don't think so. I mean, if they did, I wasn't aware of it. I believe, if my memory serves me right, my brother was probably in prison for his first term when my dad had this talk with me. And I'm sure it hit my dad. As a matter of fact, I know it did, because he said, I realize the mistakes I've made, and I look at what it's done. I lost my family, my son's in prison. So I know that my dad took accountability. His behavior and his way of what he thought was discipline, it wasn't discipline, it was abuse. If he did have that talk with my brother, I wasn't present for it. I would hope he did, but I don't know.
It's difficult for men, even just for myself, to admit when we're wrong. So I know it must have took a lot out of your father to be able to come forth and say that, because it's almost like a whole brain rewiring, realizing what you've been doing wrong this whole time. Was there substance abuse issues? Did he do any drugs or drinking, anything like that?
Yeah, there was. I don't know that there was technically one substance. I think it was a variety, you know what I mean? From amphetamines, steroids, alcohol. There was a lot of drugs that were found, like during the first incident with my stepfather. The SWAT team actually had surrounded the home and kicked the door and found all this stuff in my brother's room. So there was substances involved there. When he took our father's life, I'm sure there was substances involved, but due to the fact that this was a different kind of scenario, they didn't find my brother and my dad's body until 2 weeks after it happened, allegedly. Not if it allegedly happened, but approximately 2 weeks after it happened. I asked them, I remember asking, because I was just curious, like, in a way, it would almost make me feel a little better to know he was loaded. Like, I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but the DA was like, he was really stern. He really didn't have any compassion. He was like very militant. And he was like, well, no, what difference does it make? What's done is done. Like, and I didn't push I didn't push and say, well, I just want to know. I was very fragile. This tore my family in two. This isolated me from the rest of my family. It really did. Like, it made it to where I was on one side, quite literally in the courtroom even. And then they put my mom and like my mom's side of the family on the other side of the courtroom. It's almost like it was, I don't want to say like the DA did this but it felt like it in a way. Like, it felt like they kind of divided us as a family. And they would even ask me questions like, that's so weird that, your mom and your stepdad stayed married. Like, don't you think that's weird? And I was like, well, honestly, I think the entire situation's weird. What's happened in my family. Like, this is not typical. I wasn't supposed to, or I wasn't allowed to attend any of the court proceedings for, my dad's murder because they had subpoenaed me, which I didn't understand because I didn't know anything. But their reasoning was, well, you were the last person to look for your dad and you saw your brother in your dad's house. So once you're subpoenaed in a case against someone, you can't just go into the court proceedings and listen because they might call you, to question you at some point. They didn't, only due to the fact that right towards the end, my brother ended up taking some kind of plea. And honestly, I was really grateful that he did because I was dreading the thought of sitting up there and like there's my brother, my only blood sibling. And then I knew they were probably going to show photos and like make it a whole thing. The DA and like they have like a support person there, and the assistant DA like walked me to the courtroom. That was the first time I was able to enter the courtroom. And while I'm sitting there, and this is the part that I feel like it was so wrong, and I wish that, I'm not sure what their thinking or reasoning behind this was, but I wish that people that have these sort of jobs would think about this stuff before they do it. We were sitting in the back of the courtroom. They're working on the plea agreement, and like the assistant DA hands me a piece of paper, and she's like, here, go ahead and read this. And I'm thinking maybe it's conditions of whatever he's agreeing to. No, it was a portion of my dad's autopsy report that she handed to me right there in the courtroom. And basically it went into detail. I mean, forgive me, I hope this isn't too much, but about the type of insects that they found are on my dad, which helped lead to how long he had been deceased, bodily fluids, different bruising, broken bones. It was extremely graphic and disturbing to hear this about your own father's body. And in a courtroom filled with strangers other than my brother, and then my mom, who they put on an opposite side of the courtroom. It was like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah, that sounds like the best way to put it. Like they had you isolated from everybody and you're sitting there watching everybody else. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, that was just a very, I hope in the future, like for people that work those sort of jobs, they would think that through for the family members,
Yeah, exactly. There should be some sort of protocol in place for that.